no one's interested in your juvenile questions about some heckler at some event a couple of nights ago. Focus on the really important things. Do your job properly.
Have you ever felt like the media was hiding something important from you? That's exactly how millions of Britons feel about the grooming gang scandal. But why the silence? In this video, we're going to challenge you to look beyond the headlines and confront the uncomfortable truths about child exploitation in Britain. We'll examine the statistics, the political pressures, and the cultural taboos that have allowed this crisis to fester. Are you ready to face the facts that others are too afraid to discuss? The grooming gang crisis in Britain didn't erupt overnight. It's a dark tale that's been simmering for decades, hidden beneath a veneer of silence and shame. The first reports of organized child exploitation in northern England emerged in the late 1990s, but few could have imagined the horrifying scale of abuse that would eventually come to light. Towns like Rotherham, Rochdale, and Telford became synonymous with a scandal that would shake the nation to its core. Young girls, some as young as 11, were subjected to unimaginable horrors. They were raped by multiple perpetrators, trafficked between towns like commodities, and threatened with violence if they dared to speak out. One victim reported being doused in petrol and threatened with being set alight. These weren't isolated incidents, but part of a systematic campaign of abuse that stretched across the country. So why did it take so long for authorities to act? The answer is as infuriating as it is tragic.
So yes, the simple answer is the people want reform. We need root and branch reform in this country. Okay. And this appalling rape gang scandal that you've
hang about.
A culture of political correctness had taken hold, paralyzing those who should have been protecting the vulnerable. Staff expressed nervousness about identifying the ethnic origins of perpetrators, fearing the racist label that might follow. This misplaced concern led to a staggering number of reports being ignored or suppressed. In Telford, for instance, local authorities were more worried about potential race riots than the safety of children. They knew a high proportion of abuse cases involved men described as Asian or Pakistani, but chose to prioritize cultural sensitivities over justice. It's a damning indictment of a system that failed those it was meant to protect. Whistleblowers and victims tried to raise the alarm, but their voices were drowned out by a sea of institutional indifference. It wasn't until public awareness reached a tipping point that action was finally taken. Numerous inquiries and reports have since highlighted the catastrophic failures of local authorities and police, but for many, it's too little, too late.
Very good morning to you. Well, the simple answer is yes, we absolutely can. Look at where we are in the polls, Trevor.
I haven't asked you a question yet.
We're in the mid-20s. We're alongside the Tories and the Labour.
The call for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal grows louder by the day. Many believe that the connections between cases across different towns have been swept under the rug, leaving crucial questions unanswered. In Oldham, local politicians have gone as far as requesting a government inquiry into child abuse, reflecting the ongoing concerns about how these cases were handled. But as we dissect this tragedy, a pressing question remains. Why did it take so long for the media to report on this crisis? The silence from major news outlets like Sky News and the BBC was deafening. Were they too caught up in the same web of political correctness that ensnared the authorities? Or was there something more sinister at play? The media's silence on the grooming gang scandal has been deafening, and it's left many wondering, why did major outlets like Sky News and the BBC stay mum for so long? The accusations of media complicity are as damning as they are widespread. Critics argue that these news giants were paralyzed by a fear of appearing racist, choosing to bury their heads in the sand rather than report on a crisis that didn't fit their narrative.
Relevant, Trevor. What's relevant
No, it
is
isn't.
we want a national inquiry into the most horrific scandal. That's what tens of millions of...
But is political correctness really to blame for this journalistic failure? The debate rages on. Some argue that the media's reluctance to cover the story stems from a genuine concern about inflaming racial tensions. Others see it as a cynical attempt to avoid controversy at the expense of vulnerable children. The truth, as always, likely lies somewhere in the middle. What's clear is that the mainstream media's reticence created a vacuum that alternative news sources and social media were all too happy to fill. As the scandal grew too big to ignore,
This weekend, one of your MPs was heckled by a couple of members who were evidently supporters of Tommy Robinson and the English Defence League.
these platforms became the primary conduits for information and outrage. They gave voice to victims and whistleblowers who had been silenced for far too long. The tide, however, is turning. Public pressure is forcing a change in the media's approach, and confrontations between politicians and media figures are becoming more frequent and heated. Take Richard Tice's recent appearance on Sky News, for example.
Have you found those two? Have you found the people who heckled Lee Anderson, and do you plan to expel them? Answer yes or no, and then we can get on to the things you want to talk about.
He didn't pull any punches, accusing the network of avoiding the grooming gang issue and emphasizing the public's demand for accountability. It was a moment of raw, unfiltered truth that cut through years of evasion and half-truths. But it's not just politicians who are speaking out. Elon Musk, the tech billionaire known for his provocative statements, has thrown his considerable influence behind the cause. He's called the grooming gang scandal the worst mass crime against the people of Britain ever, and is demanding a national inquiry. Love him or hate him, Musk's involvement has thrust the issue into the global spotlight.
Have you identified and expelled them?
No one's interested in a convicted criminal, Trevor. We're talking about the most horrific
I'm interested in
scandal.
your members.
Of course, not everyone appreciates this newfound attention. Health Secretary Wes Streeting criticized Musk's comments as misjudged and certainly misinformed, while still extending an olive branch for collaboration. It's a delicate dance of damage control and political maneuvering that speaks volumes about the government's discomfort with the issue. As calls for a national inquiry grow louder, it's clear that the media's role in this scandal will be scrutinized just as closely as that of the authorities. The question remains, will they rise to the occasion and provide the fearless reporting this crisis demands, or will they continue to tiptoe around uncomfortable truths? The grooming gang scandal has laid bare the deep-rooted issues plaguing British society. It's not just about child exploitation. It's about institutional failures, media silence, and a culture of fear that allowed these horrors to persist.
Have you found the two people who stood up and heckled Lee Anderson and said Tommy Robinson should be freed?
Trevor, are you going to ask questions about the most important, horrific scandal?
Yes, I am.
The fight for justice is far from over, with high-profile figures like Elon Musk throwing their weight behind the cause. But it's not just outsiders demanding action. Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative Party leader, has called for a full national inquiry into what she bluntly calls the rape gang scandal. Her declaration that 2025 must be the year that the victims start to get justice is a rallying cry that can't be ignored. But will it be enough? What will it take for Britain to truly confront this dark chapter in its history? The answers are complex and uncomfortable. It requires a willingness to face hard truths.
We're starting the new year with a message of peace and goodwill, are we? Let's just deal with the question I asked you, then we can get on to the things you want to talk about.
To challenge ingrained prejudices, and to prioritize the protection of children over political correctness. The road ahead is long and fraught with challenges, but the alternative, continued silence and inaction, is simply unthinkable.